Microsoft's phone product had so much potential, and everything was working on their favor, but it failed horribly. The Windows Phone failed to take off despite Microsoft's billions of dollars and invaluable connections. To date, this is one of the costliest mistakes made by the company. That's why in today's video, we'll explore the rise and failure of the $8 billion Windows Phone. What exactly went wrong? Without further ado, let's get started. On October 11th, 2010, over 12 years ago, renowned tech enthusiast Stephen Fry stood in front of an attentive London audience and declared himself overjoyed to endorse the new Windows Phone OS. Fry, a longtime fan of the iPhone, was simply giddy with the short moments of delight that the excitingly new Windows Phone offered him. He had good reason to be excited because the original Windows Phone at the time was completely original and years ahead of its time in many ways. The design that dominated Apple's phones and Samsung's imitation designs was a million miles away from the chromeless, simplified interface of WP7. In contrast to an iPhone, which provided static icons, a Windows Phone provided tiles with real-time information, a calendar that displayed your upcoming appointments, a messaging app that displayed text excerpts, a phone app that displayed your most recent missed call, etc. Note that at least some of the hub pages that followed on Android, such as HTC's Blink feed or the Google Now cards, with contextually relevant news and information, were influenced by what Microsoft did with Windows Phone, at the very least, what Microsoft had in mind. However, in my opinion, the failure of Microsoft to execute its vision and avant-garde design sensibility was its biggest mistake. Windows Phone was significantly compromised and watered down due to initial feedback that it was too strange and alien to mobile users. It's simple to overlook how quick and responsive Windows Phone felt compared to anything Android could produce now. The on-screen keyboard provided by Microsoft was also far superior. Moreover, Microsoft's solution had to be brought up if you wanted to discuss the most polished method of displaying notifications or helpful information on the lock screen. Windows Phone was comparable to the iPhone in some of the most significant and extensive ways, mainly because Microsoft adopted an Apple-like strategy of tightly regulating the user experience across all devices and manufacturers. It was software produced in a walled-off, closed-shop environment and very well polished and refined. Industrial design revolution. It has never been given enough credit how much the Windows Phone ecosystem has contributed to the overall field of smartphone design. The Samsung Omnia 7 with a 4-inch OLED display, the Dell Venue Pro with a slide-out keyboard, and the HTC 7 Surround with a large integrated speaker and kickstand were just a few of the stunning and incredibly amazing phones that came with the platform at launch. But the following year, Windows Phone began to pull ahead in terms of industrial design, when HTC unveiled the Windows Phone 8X and 8S, and Nokia unveiled the Lumia 800. According to those who reviewed them, those phones were among the most attractive and cutting-edge in terms of design. It didn't matter that Nokia was copying itself by using the lovely pillow-shaped Nokia N9 design. A year later, Microsoft followed up with the best designs from Nokia and HTC. Microsoft launched Windows Phone 7 with a battery of particular designs from every aspirant global phone maker. Microsoft dubbed the Windows Phone 8X and 8S, which HTC heavily invested in making signature Windows Phone devices. On the other hand, Nokia bet its entire future on Windows Phone. This was a turning point for the mobile operating system because the eventual failure of these phones to challenge the market dominance of the iPhone and Android caused a downward spiral in confidence among Microsoft's hardware partners and the eventual demise of Nokia as a phone manufacturer. Phone cameras. When Windows Phone first came out, it challenged our ideas of what makes an exemplary user interface. Then, the OS gave us some of the most beautiful phone hardware we had ever seen. The Lumia 1020 and its recognizable round camera bump also helped it advance camera technology before its star began to fade. The Lumia 1020 was a Symbian-powered soft replacement for the hardcore Nokia 808 PureView. The 41-megapixel camera sensors in both phones represented essential developments in mobile imaging. The 808's camera is still so good to this day. On the other hand, the Lumia 1020 that came after it strikes a balance between imaging ability and operating system capability, falling short in the imaging department. Several issues hindered the popularity of the Windows Phone, but the essential hardware features of good design, excellent imaging, and long battery life were almost always guaranteed. Then the YouTube blockade began in August 2013. YouTube blockade. Why Microsoft's numerous and laborious Windows Phone initiatives ultimately failed can be attributed in large part to the platform's persistent inability to draw in third-party app developers. The subject of an Instagram app for Windows Phone had to be sidestepped every time Nokia unveiled a new model. While Microsoft was outperforming Google in terms of offering a slicker and more seamless first-party app experience, Google was easily winning by having more indispensable apps and a more vibrant third-party ecosystem. We'd all be discussing Android's demise if Microsoft's Bing had defeated Google Search, Hotmail had remained popular, and Internet Explorer had continued to rule the web browser world. YouTube was likely Microsoft's most significant missing app, and that was no accident. Although there has been a long history of not getting along between Google and Microsoft over YouTube's inclusion on Windows Phone, in the end, Google did not want to allow Windows Phone to compete with Android successfully. Given that most internet usage now occurs on mobile devices and that we spend a significant amount of time on YouTube while doing so, any platform without a dedicated YouTube app is severely handicapped. Taking over Nokia. By 2014, Windows Phone had run out of good news, and Microsoft and the mobile industry were using it as a learning experience. HTC and Samsung did not like how Microsoft favored Nokia, so the company finally bit the bullet and bought the famous Finnish phone maker. Then came a series of rebranding and repositioning efforts, as well as the first smartphones with Microsoft logos on them. But Microsoft needed help to change the core set by its skeleton of apps. So it kept trying to win people over by focusing on imaging and design, which have always been Nokia's strong points. In the end, Android companies like Samsung finally realized how important those things were, and they ended up beating the old Nokia at its own game. One of Microsoft's most essential problems before it bought Nokia was that it needed to agree on what should come first. Microsoft wanted to make a phone like the iPhone, while Nokia wanted to reduce the Windows Phone's price by using less power and resources. Nokia was trying to take advantage of the fact that its brand was already well known in India and the rest of the Asian subcontinent, where markets were growing quickly, while Microsoft was trying to figure out how to compete with its oldest rival. Both sides were frustrated with how slowly things were going, and they let the public know about it. This was to be expected since the two companies were working toward different goals. Microsoft wanted Nokia to be its de facto in-house Windows Phone design team, but it still wanted Samsung and HTC to spend money on making their own phones. It was a selfish move that didn't work out. Microsoft could have saved itself a lot of trouble if it had bought Nokia sooner and made a single plan for where Windows Phone was going. It was never a reasonable goal to try to beat both iOS at the high end and Android at the low end. So, what's happened since Microsoft bought Nokia 3 years ago? The 2.5%. Well, in 2015, Gartner reported that 96.8% of all phones sold had either the iPhone OS or the Android OS. This means that the smartphone market is dominated by just two companies, Apple and Google. Microsoft's market share was 2.5% then, and it has been going down. Tom Warren, who was The Verge's most steadfast Windows Phone supporter, gave up at the end of 2014. Windows Phone has been around for as long as it has been because Microsoft has a lot of money to keep its zombie corpse alive. However, Microsoft has given up on making its smartphone operating system, but it wasn't out of the smartphone market yet. In 2020, it showed off the Surface Duo, which had two screens. It was based on Android, but Microsoft made many changes to the user interface to do powerful split-screen multitasking. Even though it wasn't a foldable phone, it claimed to have some of the same benefits. This was followed by the Surface Duo 2, which fixed some of the problems with the first model, especially with the camera, the battery, and the fact that it didn't have a cover display. However, these devices are still niche products that don't really compete with other products on the market. But even if we look back on this whole project as a failed attempt to compete with Apple and Google, we shouldn't forget the good things it has brought to the world. With the large amount of money that Microsoft and its partners put into building a third viable ecosystem, the mobile industry was in a much better position. There are a lot of lessons to be learned and a lot of hardware innovations to be copied from them. That's it for today. What else do you think Windows could have done to make their phone a success? Where did they miss? Comment below. Let's engage. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell.